the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Better Edge. Visit betteredge.com today or get the app in the iOS App Store. Use code SPOTTRAC, SPOTRAC. Get yourself $20 on the house to get started on the best betting experience in the United States. You set the VIGs. Take away the juice that the big boys in the marketplaces set and keep from themselves. You create the odds. You create the bets. Go head-to-head against a friend. Put it out there for the public. Create a competition. You have plenty of control and plenty of lightning-fast payouts coming your way. That's betteredge.com. My name is Mike Giannetti. It is Monday, July 7th. Kind of nice to step away from the NFL for a minute. And honestly, the NBA a little bit as well. The big buzz of the NBA offseason is already kind of behind us, at least the first wave, despite the fact that most of the big things became actually official yesterday, July 6th. Keith Smith, Scott Allen working their butts off to get Spot Track fully updated in that regard. So please utilize those views and questions, comments. I know Keith gets inundated with them and he loves it. So if you're confused with the apron systems, with where teams appear to be in terms of big trades, big moves, big signings, how they can operate going forward, Keith is certainly your guy on the socials for that. And he is as up to date with it as any human being possibly can be. And that goes for as well the NBA views on Spot Track. Not unlike the NHL views, which I spent a good amount of time on this morning, making sure those are all up to snuff. Decent free agency, about $500,000 put into free agency right now. Plenty more in pre-free agency extensions. Some notable trades. That's kind of quieted down a little bit here as we head into the arbitration process of the NHL. Not sure there's an offer sheet out there, unfortunately, and that's becoming more and more of a trend in most of these sports, but it's still possible in the NBA with Kuminga and maybe Josh Giddey. Probably less likely the more days we get here, but that's sort of where these two leagues are living right now. And those of you who follow soccer, the English Premier League continues to cook in terms of the major teams spending major dollars. If you think the Dodgers are bad, dive yourself into some EPL numbers at some point in your life and enjoy that, because teams are paying upwards of 80, 90 just to get players in the door, let alone then what their annual weekly wages would be. So those numbers continue to be eye-popping, but the NBA numbers that we've been able to put forward over the past couple of years and continue to do so over the next 4 or 5 are really going to start standing off the page, as we kind of discussed with Keith a couple of weeks ago. We'll bring him back soon to kind of recap some things. He's doing that on the site, by the way, as well. And we'll continue to flip the page because it is a big baseball week. We're a week away, less than a week away now from the actual draft, which for those of you who don't follow is always mid-season, right around the All-Star weekend. It happens right in Atlanta. It's a 2-day event. Next Sunday, the 13th, will be the first 74 picks. Monday will be the rest of those picks through the 20 rounds. And then the game is Tuesday. The All-Star game is Tuesday. And these are the two pieces that are now live on SpotTrack.com that I spent the weekend working on. I just posted the All-Star rosters from head to toe with how these players were acquired, because I think that's fascinating. This is certainly not a draft and develop league anymore. That's for darn sure. A heck of a lot of these players were acquired via trade. Bunch of international players that were, that's essentially a draft for the most part without actually drafting. So international and draft still lead the way when you combine this all up, but plenty of trades. One waiver claim, which I thought was unique. Check out the piece to figure out who that player is, because he's a fun player. And by the way, a huge MLB financial guy from what I can see on the socials. So one waiver claim made it to the All-Star game this year. Plenty of Dodgers, plenty of Tigers, plenty of usual suspects, and some fresh faces that, as the piece notes, could really turn themselves into some millions and millions and millions of dollars in extensions this winter. We've got a bunch of UFAs that I make note of, but that's the plan. That's the theme for this piece, which is breaking down the starting lineups, the reserves, the pitching staffs, how these players were acquired and where they're going financially. So whatever guaranteed money is left on their contract, how much team control is left, pending UFAs, options, things like that. I give you the full scope of 2025's best in terms of Major League Baseball. And then a much grander piece, now live on Spotrac.com, the comprehensive 2025 MLB draft primer. But it's not like the ones you're probably seeing on some of these other sites, which is, these are the top 100 prospects. This is what these teams need. If you need that content, you can go elsewhere to get it. I kind of took a different approach, which is more of an educational approach. Number one, because things have changed so much over the course of the past few years with this league. I just wanted to make sure I had a full handle on how this draft system worked from start to finish. And then I thought, if I'm asking this question, maybe there's more people out there asking those questions as well. So this is sort of a glossary, a how-to, a wizzy, a wiki, however you want to classify it. But what makes a player eligible for the draft? How does the new lottery system work? What were the odds, and how did that lottery system actually come to fruition for 2025? Kind of a fascinating situation there, by the way. And there's an ineligible part of this. So based on revenue, based on tax, based on year over year lottery picks, some teams were ineligible this year. And as the standings currently sit, some teams will be ineligible next year to get a top 6 lottery pick. I make note of that. So not only am I kind of going on a global, this is how the draft works, but I'm also tying in exactly how it's working for 2025 specifically as well. There are luxury tax penalties involved with this draft. 3 teams had to drop 10 spots in the first round because of that. Then we get into the actual draft signing bonuses themselves, which for the most part is what people care about. Every single player in the top 10 rounds has a slotted signing bonus, similar to the rookie wage scales you see elsewhere, but these are not actually contracts. It's just a single signing bonus. And by the way, it's the recommendation of the signing bonus. It's what the CBA, it's what the percentage of the total pool, which this year is about $350 million, is for that specific draft pick within the first 10 rounds. Often teams go over, under that. It's kind of a cat and mouse, chess versus checkers game, whereas if you select somebody, if you overreach a little bit with a top pick, with a first round pick, and maybe that player doesn't deserve to be the number 4 overall pick, but you've taken him as such with the agreement, the wink, wink, shake agreement that we're going to go under slot value with this pick. So if the slot is worth $8 million, the signing bonus comes in at $6.5 million. That now leaves that team an extra $1.5 million to use on the remainder of their first 10 rounds draft picks. So every team has a draft pool, which is also built into this piece on Spotrac.com. We've got bonus pools and things like that. I'm going to go through the specifics of this with Dan Soman because he's sort of the MLB expert behind this that I bounced a bunch of questions off of to get to this primer. But that's, for the most part, the guts of this. And we get real deep with this piece. So there's a new prospect promotion incentive pick, which is notable. It's the 28th pick this year. There's a bunch of ways to get extra picks. So in the NFL, there's the comp picks, the compensatory draft picks. For the most part, that's pretty popular. Baseball's got a whole bunch of ways to get these. Obviously the qualifying offer. And when you lose a player of value with that attached to them, you garner a significant pick. There's also random free agency compensation picks. There's also compensation picks for players that don't sign in previous drafts. That's part of the 2025 draft. And again, I'm explaining why this is happening, but also showing you where it's happening in the 2025 draft, specifically speaking. So it's the first round, then there's the compensation round, then there's the competitive balance round. And the same thing happens in the second round and the third and the fourth and the pick for those compensation picks. So it's convoluted. It's kind of difficult to wrap your head around unless you're looking at it. But I think to have everything in one place like this piece does, and then if you put this next to our draft tracker, which gives you every bonus slot, a label of what the pick is, if it's not a standard draft pick, if it's one of these comp picks or PPI picks or whatever it's going to be, I think this will help you at least understand where we're headed or where the current MLB draft system is. from an overall kind of a sky view, because it is complicated, but it still is the cheapest, most effective way for most teams to get better, stay good, improve, find trade assets, one of the two. And that's where I'll finish, which is in the notable notes section of this piece, this primer piece. I tried to answer a few questions, and I'm going to continue to add to this as more questions come up. Please reach out at SpotTrack on all the socials. As more questions come up internally, externally, I'm going to try to add to this and make this sort of a one-stop shop for, not only the details of this draft, but FAQs and things like that. So when can these players be traded? When can these players sign major league contracts? Is there a deadline to sign these rookies? What happens if they don't sign? Things like that. Those are all baked into this primer. And like I said, I'm sure I'll have a dozen more come to mind as we get closer and closer to this draft and things pop up or things happen during the draft that are unexpected, because that's the nature of this beast. I will continue to add to this piece, push it back out there, and make sure everybody's aware so we can all kind of stay on the same page. But I did figure if I'm lacking a total understanding of what's happening here, and I care about the sport, for those of you who do care about the sport, I'm sure there's questions that you're probably throwing out to Reddit or places like that and hoping for decent answers. So hopefully this becomes sort of that spot for at least as much info as we can pack into one piece, and try to make it evergreen to roll over into next year, where I can just kind of update specific things like who's the PPI pick, where are the comp picks landing this year, who's got the number one overall pick, and what does that mean for that franchise. And then I did throw 4 names of players that I think, just kind of reading some tea leaves, could be in play for the number one pick, because I don't think anybody thinks there's an actual far and away slam dunk number one pick. The Nationals, who have the pick, could go in a bunch of directions. We're going to talk to Dan in a second here about what that looks like. But it's, for the most part, it's going to be a fascinating draft for a bunch of reasons. And I think I've highlighted most of those in this piece. But let's see what Dan has to say about some of this money stuff, some of the things he unearthed in his research, not only for this piece, but for many of the views he's been building on SpotTrack on their Major League Baseball level. All right, Dan, I tried to give a big comprehensive intro to this piece that we did. And I want to get your thoughts on some of the things that are built into this, but then maybe expand it out to some real life examples and things like that. I want to start with this because my guess is, I think I mentioned to you last night after I kind of got to the finish line with this piece, that I definitely learned some things. And if I'm learning some things as a pretty above average follower of this sport, I think there's some people out there that definitely lack some of the knowledge with some of the elements of this draft. And I can tell you right now, this prospect promotion incentive pick came out of nowhere for me. It's not a thing I've heard about even one time before I started to type in details of the Major League Baseball draft into the Google search machine. I'm glad it exists, but if you want to give a quick just a primer on what it is and how it's going to impact the 2025 draft, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so that's where you hear a lot about that threshold deadline early in the season. About 2 weeks in, we heard it a lot with Paul Skeens previously, where teams who think they have a prospect. Sorry, let me back up. It's a prospect on one of the major top prospect lists within an organization. If those players start or earn a full year of service time, which basically you need to be on the roster for all but almost 2 weeks of the season, they are eligible to earn you a pick if they finish in the top voting for rookie of the year. So that's where at the end of this year, you'll start to hear about teams sort of saving prospects to keep their rookie eligibility for next year, in order to keep them in play for the rookie of the year conversation in 2026. But the Royals added quite a bit of money here through Bobby Witt finishing that way. So you can immediately see the massive value that's added if they play their cards right. Now, it's a long shot. A lot of things have to go right, but it is something that can be valuable if teams sort of thread the needle correctly.
Yeah. So to kind of say it differently, it's a real incentive and push for teams to not bury their top prospects in the minor leagues for service time purposes. This is a real, it's a way to reward teams that just say, screw that part of it. We're going to bring these players up because we could, and Kansas City has just done it, we could ascertain a significant draft pick if we play our cards right and this player becomes the player we think he's going to be, right? So Kansas City is getting pick 28 out of this year, which is not nothing. You know what I mean? This is of any league where draft picks could come from anywhere. It's this league, and to get that extra pick, you're right. It's going to cost them some extra coin to draft a player at 28, but at the very worst, they've just gained themselves another trade asset, right? I mean, that's what they've done here by Bobby Witt Jr. And by the way, what I think is fascinating about him is this draft pick came from Bobby Witt finishing top 3 in MVP voting last year. So it's either winning the Rookie of the Year or being near the top of the MVP list or Cy Young list for a pitcher, which then rolls into next year's award. Can I ask you this question? Because I think I know the answer, but that means more than one team can essentially be awarded a pick within a year, right?
Correct. Yep. I believe it was 2 years ago, Adley Rutschman and Julio Rodriguez earned their teams PPI picks, but I can check that while we're talking.
Yeah. In fact, I put that in the piece. So this is the 4th iteration of this PPI actually coming to fruition. I imagine you're completely on board with this, right? Because this accelerates good players getting to the big leagues, which, can be good and bad at times, but then also teams benefit to a certain degree with this nice pick. This seems like a slam dunk. Is this just, you think, step one in getting this service time stuff fixed? Or do you think that, let me put it this way. Do you think that this is the league's version of we've done something, we're good for another 15 years now?
Difficult to, it's hard to, there's so many ripple effects caused by this and so many things need to get right or go right in that process that I don't really think it's something teams are leaning on or like forming. They're certainly not forming development plans around that. But when a player becomes ready, may they push the timeline a month, 6 weeks, something like that. I think it's at least within range, right? I mean, you're seeing this discussion happen with Cleveland Guardians right now. Right fielder Chase DeLauder. A lot of people think that he's ready for the big league. Some people are saying the Guardians are pretty much falling out of the race here, losing 10 in a row. Are they that there's a potential that they're sort of delaying his call up? Trying to reserve his rookie status for 2026. But again, so much has to go right. He would then have to win the Rookie of the Year, be the best player, be the best rookie in the American League. I mean, that's an uphill climb, so no one is necessarily leaning on that, like I said, but it's a massive bonus. Like the Royals would have had just over $9 million to work with, the bottom third of the league. Now they'll have almost $13 million to work with in their overall pool. They're in the middle third of the league, if you will. That if they maneuver correctly, that could be very helpful for them in this draft. Now, it's situation by situation with that, but.
And by the way, what you're saying there is it's increased their total pool, so they can play a little chess now with all of their draft picks to spread things out a little bit more evenly versus getting bopped with the top number 1 pick bonus and then having to kind of deal with things in the 9th and 10th round, right?
Correct. As you move down the draft board, guys who fall are settling for $1 million, $2 million. So theoretically, they could turn that slot value into 3 or 4 valuable players down the draft board. Will they? I'm not sure. They could spend it all on top. Who knows how they'll execute? But it's a big bonus if teams can hit on it correctly. So
definitely, and smart GMs will use this to their advantage. There's no question about that. I don't want to get down the service time track too much because it's really adjacent to this conversation we're having here, but still super relevant. Just your gut with the past couple of seasons. I know, the Marcelo Mayer stuff this year, Roman Anthony came up in early June. Do you feel like things are getting better in terms of teams just saying good players are good players Or do you still think there's quite a lot of massaging, timelining happening in terms of the service time to make sure that they can maximize the control part of it?
I certainly think small and middle markets are and have to manipulate things. Rightfully so. It's within the CBA, their CBA right, to maneuver that way. And I think small market teams have to do that. I think it's hard though it's hard to really assign, how do I want to say this? It's hard to know teams' motivations, if you will.
Yeah.
Like the Red Sox, we're seeing all of these guys sign, a bunch of these guys sign early extensions, pre-arbitration extensions. There could be reasons like that they're not getting called up, or you know what I mean? There's non-surface level things going on that we're not always understanding, that I don't want to say it's getting better or worse with just some of the recent examples, if you will. But as a whole, I think teams are still maneuvering that way.
Me too. It seems like it's somewhat plateaued, which is a good thing. I don't think it's getting worse, to say it that way, but I'm not sure. And I wish we had better data on it, but we certainly have better data on the fact that more of these players are getting early extensions. But again, even the results on that are TBD. You know what I mean? I don't think, for the most part, that many of these are swinging in the player's favor right now. We've done a little work on that, the Acuna and stuff like that. But I do think that for the most part, it's silly to turn down $100 million or $80 million if that's being offered to you at 23 years old or 24. But in the long run, I still think agents who sit down, the veteran agents who would sit down with these players, and for the most part, the veteran agents are still going this way, would say, bite the bullet, suck it up through arbitration. Let's get closer to that free agency finish line. And then we can really start to work things a little bit, because the deadline will spur a much more favorable number, despite the fact that you're not going to get two big contracts. You're going to get one big splashy contract, but it's going to be worth the squeeze. So I still don't think we have an answer on if the early extension with a backup extension coming after it is the better plan for these superstar players. But I don't know. The game just seems to be kind of chaotic in that regard. And I think I kind of like it that way. That's different teams operate differently.
Yeah. And I think we'll continue to kind of go back and forth as we see some of these deals pop up. I mean, I think I'm firmly in the range of, like, if a superstar player wants to lock in $50 million with the opportunity to get back on the market at a youngish age, like some of these guys breaking into the league at 22, 23, if they can give themselves the opportunity to get back on the market for a second major contract while still locking in, $50 million, the numbers have far surpassed that, but it's still serious life-changing money for any player. So compared to somebody who might only make a couple million through, if they don't make it all the way to free agency. So I think we're going to kind of shift back and forth as the ebbs and flows of the league continue to kind of play out.
Not to mention, there's quite a few players attached to some borrowing services that may need to get that money as quickly as possible to start to get themselves back to ground zero. But that's probably for another conversation. The lottery, which is new based on 2023. I knew it existed. I didn't really have a comprehensive handle on exactly how it worked until the last couple of days when I put together this piece. I think I like it quite a bit. I certainly heard about how things happened this year with the lottery and how the Athletics and White Sox were ineligible for a top 6 pick, really a top 9 pick, because teams that receive revenue on at least on the per the last season. It's kind of year to year. It's going to change every year in terms of which teams are payers or receivers. But if you received revenue and you were a lottery pick last year, you cannot be a lottery pick this year. And it looks like, based on the standings right now, at least at the halfway mark, Dan, we've got 3 teams sitting in that position: the Rockies, the Nationals, and the Angels, all set to receive some sort of revenue, and all are going to be lottery picks here in next week's draft on Sunday. So I like that part of it. I think it's good that you can't just kind of sit and at the top of the lottery odds annually and tank yourself for a decade to get yourself essentially a slate of number one overall picks. That's a good move. I do like the fact that every non-playoff team is involved, similar to basketball, where you can have somebody slide way up with terrible odds and garner themselves a top pick. For instance, this year, Washington had the fourth best odds and yet won the number one overall pick. We'll get to them in a second. Is there anything about the lottery that you love, you hate, you think is notable, you think may change over the course of maybe the next CBA? And is it overall a good idea for Major League Baseball based on how the economy has been going within the league?
I think it's fine overall. There's so much variance and chaos in the MLB draft anyway, as we talked about. It's not necessarily a 1-for-1 best players get selected in any kind of chronological order because of what we've talked about at length here. Going below slot on certain guys to be able to spread money out further down the board. So it doesn't necessarily translate, but I do like it from the factor that, like, from generational type of prospects, teams can't necessarily tank in quote unquote tank from a baseball perspective in any given year, because it's highly unlikely that they won't win the first overall pick just because they have the worst overall record, as we've seen play out here now basically every year since this has started.
We know it's not nearly as important as any of these other leagues, because the Chicago White Sox had the worst team basically in the history of baseball last year and knew coming into the season that they couldn't have a lottery pick. They knew it. They knew the rules. They knew exactly how things were going to fall. They were going to be at best the 10th pick in the draft. And to know that and have that knowledge and still basically punt from day one in 2024 kind of proves, and by the way, I know there are certain MLB drafts where being one or two can change the course of your franchise. The Skeens, the Harpers, the Strasburgs. We've been there before. But this wasn't one of them, and they just didn't care. They would rather not pay money than have to worry about the draft, and that's significant. So I do think the lottery is good. I don't think too much of it will change because of what we're talking about here. It's just not a slam dunk scenario. It's a slam dunk crutch that many of these other leagues need it to be. And we'll see how it plays out here. The bonus pool system, which on its face looks healthy. But I'm going to ask this question to you because you've been really following this stuff for a bunch of years now. Are these players being paid enough money, Dan? Because for the most part, even 75% of these first round picks don't hit Major League Baseball for 3 years. That's probably the average amount of time these players spend in the minor league system. And the drop off on these bonuses after you get basically past the fourth or fifth pick is so significant. It feels like it's modeling the NFL model or the NBA model where there are certain, the lottery picks and then everybody else is just one big pool. It feels like this rookie scale should be much more aggressive, all things considered, so that we can get ourselves to a situation where teams don't have to bail these players out with early extensions. We can slow play these players for the most part who aren't slam dunk MLB ready players, as you've noted already, and get themselves all to a healthy financial status and a healthy baseball status so this league can continue to prosper. That was my takeaway, that I don't think these bonuses are escalating enough year over year.
I understand that sentiment. I guess I don't necessarily believe that increasing these would necessarily trickle down to some even distribution throughout, the picks. And what I mean by that is
the teams utilize the bonuses.
Yeah, like the money would still all go up top, and we would just get new record bonuses with the top play amongst the top. The first, let's call it the first day draft picks, the top 70 plus picks or whatever it ends up being in a given year. And I mostly say that because like teams, this isn't like it's not some fair, equity and fairness project here. Like a college senior who has no eligibility and wants to keep their hopes of playing for a major league organization alive will sign for literally $1,000 to do that, where they, if the slot, a team can save a massive amount on that bonus to redistribute to other players, right? So that's not going to change at any point. So, I mean, if you want to talk about a minimum signing bonus value, then I would maybe entertain that as a change. But I mean, until they can change that in the CBA, I highly doubt that's a priority. So
you're bringing up great points here, because you're right. That's the correct pushback to my sentiment. But I'll push back this way. You're not wrong about the graduating senior who has no other options but maybe international play, right? That's it. That's where that player's headed, either through the draft as an undrafted free agent or into international waters to kind of find his sea legs to get himself ready for maybe another run at Major League Baseball. That's a one-of-one scenario, though. We know what's happening with college baseball right now, and we know what's happening with this name, image, likeness stuff, with teams allocating significant dollars to their collectives to make sure that their players are properly paid at all points in time. The junior college system is as thriving as it's ever been, not only from a transfer perspective, but also to get players 1 year and then into Major League Baseball as quickly as possible. I think we'll get to a point, Dan, where these bonuses are going to have to keep up with college baseball. And I don't think they're even close, and they're just waiting to be pressured, in my opinion. Baseball is just waiting for that moment where they don't have 3 players that don't sign bonuses and go undrafted. They have a dozen. And once it becomes a story on the top fold of ESPN.com or The Athletic that, holy crap, 12 legitimate prospects didn't sign their bonuses and went back to college, baseball will already be behind the 8 ball, and it'll be a terrible look for their league. And I think they need to be proactive about it. I think they need to aggressively say, we've got to treat the entry-level portion of our league as if it's head and shoulders above staying in college baseball or staying in JUCO baseball or going to international baseball for a while. And I don't think they're there yet, I guess is my point. They're still kind of running off the old model,
Yeah, just to be clear, I am all for these players making more money. I just wanted to lay out the point that I don't think teams' behaviors will change from how they distribute that money.
Manipulated, right?
Yeah, I'm all for these bonus pools. The total bonus pool increasing if it means these players make more money. I was not trying to argue that at all. I just wanted to lay out the point that until the rules change regarding minimum signing bonuses, you're still going to get those behaviors from organizations. And I still think the top 1 to 5% of prospects will get the majority of the money, as we tend to see now. But I'm all for those. I'm all for the guys getting more money,
Yeah. All right. So let's break it down. And by the way, I just thought of a question. In my intro, one of the things I said was, I know that I left 12 things out of this piece and I'm going to think of them over the course of the week. I already thought of one. So I've got a random question coming your way in a second here. There's about $350 million allocated to this rookie scale. That means bonus pools of about ranging between 5 and change to 17 million, with the Mariners at the top, the Yankees at the bottom. Much of it is based on how many draft picks they've ascertained through compensation and things like that. But for the most part, it's a pretty good pool system here. Much more than half the league has at least 10 million to work with over the course of next Sunday and Monday. That will be a nice distribution for these 10 to 12 picks that these teams have. Here's my question for you. If I tell you the Mariners have 11 picks and over 17 million to work with in terms of their bonus pool, is there anything stopping them from not using the full 17 million? Are there penalties? Does it subtract from their 2026 pool? Is there anything that the baseball league, that Major League Baseball or the CBA does to a team that doesn't utilize their full bonus pool?
Not that I know of, because teams typically spend at their bonus pool, their entire bonus pool, or up to 5%, which you've laid out the overages and the penalties in the piece here. But the MLB, I try to explain this to as many people as I can. Spending in the MLB draft is probably the MLB draft is probably the most efficient way to spend money in the league. The international pool is a total crapshoot with players that are 16, 17 years old. The MLB draft to spend what teams, for a team to spend, for the Mariners, for example, to spend $17 million plus 5% in overages is for the potential crop of players they could put together with that amount of money is extremely, extremely valuable from an organizational building perspective. Yep. So I have,
in other words, it's never really been a problem.
Well, the last time I can really recall it being a problem was with the Orioles, who just have never really, but that was more specifically in the international market rather than the draft market. And I don't recall there being penalties, but from a league-wide example, everybody said, why the hell aren't you spending the money to build here? That's the smartest way to build. But I'm sure the league would step in, or the Players Association would complain at a certain point if a team was lowballing, but there's really no benefit to doing that from an organizational development perspective.
I'm going to read the CBA and find the actual answer. I like your answer, which is it's not a problem to worry about. But it's not until it is, right?
For sure.
There are certain teams we can think of who would absolutely try to do this. You know who wouldn't let this happen, though? Agents. Ever. They know exactly. They're monitoring draft bonus pools as closely as we are in spreadsheets and apps and things like that they have internally. They know exactly what number they can walk into that room and ask for all of their players, whether they're top prospects or middling prospects. They would never let it happen. And if teams try to bully the agents at this level, right, at the draft level, good luck in free agency and good luck in arbitration and all those things that actually have to matter with tens of millions of dollars, not $50,000 to $150,000 bonuses in many of these cases. Real quickly, the compensation picks, Dan. There's two different levels of this, right? There's the compensation picks that are attached to the qualifying offer, which are made public because these are the biggest players heading to free agency every year. It's a handful of 10 to 20 players generally that are slapped the QO. Maybe we get one player a year that signs it. I think we had one this year. I'm drawing a blank. Can you remember who it was? I couldn't believe that he signed the qualifying offer this year. I'm not going to remember it. But we get about one or two a year that actually sign the qualifying offer.
It was Nick Martinez.
Bingo, Reds. And it's not going well, by the way. And if they don't sign, they go back into free agency. If they sign with another team, the level of which they sign a contract monetarily determines just how good of a draft pick is coming back. And then there's some forfeitures and things like that built in as well. So that's your standard. Most leagues have some form of this where you can essentially say, this is one of our notable players heading to free agency. We want to kick back if things don't work out and we don't get this player back. But there's more, right? There's these unsigned draft picks that we talk about. There are teams that lose non-qualified players in free agency that are non-revenue teams or revenue payers that can still get some compensation back via draft picks. And by the way, we're talking about extra firsts, extra seconds, extra thirds, extra fourth round picks. These are good draft picks.
Day one draft picks. Yeah.
Day one draft picks. So how much, this is an objective question, but I know how much gamesmanship happens in the NFL with this stuff and how much math is being done on every single move going in and going out to try to ascertain as many of these comp picks as humanly possible. Do you think baseball teams are right there in terms of following the analytics with this stuff? Maybe even wink, wink, talking to some other organizations every now and then to see how players are valued, to understand exactly where they might fall, or quite frankly, to kind of go with the theme of this conversation, are these picks just not valued as much as an NFL comp pick in the third round? You know what I mean? Is it just, we'll take it if we can get it, but we're not going to overpay or underpay in any regard in free agency to set ourselves up for the next upcoming draft?
I wish I had it in front of me and I'm trying to find it in my notes, but I know there's like a number, like there's a overall gross amount that teams consider these picks to have, like a financial value that's being traded, if you will.
Sure.
So like, for instance, when the Giants signed Matt Chapman and he had a qualifying offer attached to him, there was the number they gave him factored in that amount, if you will, of the pick that they were
draft
giving.
cost. Yeah,
correct. And I can't find it. I wish I had it off the top of my head, but I don't want to say the number without knowing it correctly. So, but that is, to answer your question, absolutely. They know the value, the perceived value of what that pick holds, and in the context of what they're giving up when they sign a free agent who has a qualifying offer attached.
So when we hear teams are lowballing their current free agents, and then that player goes out and gets 20% more on the open market, and we call it an overpay on the open market, the lowball that came from the previous team, from the relinquishing team, has this attached to it, right? We know exactly what the threshold's going to be once you walk away on December 1st, but we've done the math on the tax portion of it, the draft portion of it, the losses versus detains, what we will gain back in compensatory picks. And this is where we need to be. If you want to go and get more to go elsewhere, that's fine, but that's going to benefit our mathematical formula, right? Like, we already have that baked into our cake. There are certainly instances where teams get burned, but this is all part of the process, right? It's not as easy as bidding wars going back and forth for many of these players. Some of the top players, of course, that's exactly what happens. But, for your Nick Martinez's, right, who maybe have that $16 to $18 million market value, it's down to the dollar points in terms of what the draft costs and the tax costs and things like that would be going forward.
I can actually give you an example. I think that will fit your point pretty good. Ha-Seong Kim signed with the Rays for 1 year, 13. Sorry, excuse me. It was technically 2 for 29. It was a 1 for 13 guarantee. And next year he has a $16 million player option. Now, from reading I've seen, that he's qualifying offer eligible. And so even if he exercised his opt-out to hit free agency, the Rays would likely tag him with a QO. Now, it was 21.05 this year, likely to go up.
Yeah.
Let's call it 22 just for conversation's sake. It's still a nice 1 year payday, but when these guys are trying to get lengthy multi-year guarantees, that becomes a negotiation factor. So like, whether the Rays try and extend him, whether he says, well, I'll just play out this $16 million player option because I'm not really sure they tag me with the qualifying offer. I mean, it definitely becomes a point in negotiations here, if that's what you were trying to ask me.
Yeah, I think I knew this. I wanted the general population to know this too, that one of the takeaways from this primer piece is that it is not one-to-one. Like, every decision is multi-layered in Major League Baseball, not just how much luxury tax, impact is this going to have, but actual income tax impact, right? And certainly draft compensation impact and things like that. There's a lot of layers happening with even the simplest 1 for 5 year free agent contracts that are going to happen over the course of an offseason. And by the way, it's one of the reasons free agency takes so freaking long, is that there's so much jockeying. Players and agents are doing so much work with these teams to try to maximize their end of the spectrum, knowing that these teams have a formula in place. Every single team they walk into or pick up the phone and call or get on a Zoom with has their own 2025 or next year 2026 formula in place. Budget, draft, comp picks formula in place. And an agent coming in with a number is going to impact that positively or negatively. So to say things get drawn out is annoying, and I hate it. And I think it impacts the popularity of the sport. But this is why. There's too many layers, I think, to every single move in Major League Baseball. And by the way, the NBA is getting there to the point of where fans are just freaking lost in the NBA. They are literally on Reddit and on Twitter trying to figure out every single thing that's happening because they have no idea how moves impact the league anymore in that league. And I do think the NBA is going to take a negative impact hit because of it. But baseball's had this forever. You know what I mean? Like, some of the things that we've put in this piece today, Dan, the average fan has had no clue existed. No clue. And some of them have been around for forever. Do you think the average fan knows it's illegal to sign a rookie to a major league contract? That hasn't happened since 2009 in Steven Strasburg. And it's been illegal since 2012 with the iteration of 3 CBAs ago, believe it or not. But it's not possible to sign a player to a contract. Now, it almost happened. You and I had a fun conversation last night. Kyler Murray and Scott Boras almost got to the finish line on a revised amendment to the CBA to allow him to sign a multi-year guaranteed contract out of the gate with the Athletics in order to keep him away from football. But at the end, he chose to play quarterback instead. So it's possible that we can get ourselves back to that point. But for now, it's a signing bonus and a minor league contract for all of these players that are drafted over the course of the next couple of days here, right?
Yep. Pretty straightforward. Whatever they sign in their signing bonus is pretty much what they'll make outside of minor league minimums and major league minimums for the first 3 years before arbitration, if they were to make it to the majors, obviously. So,
all right.
That's it.
I teased Strasburg. I teased the Nationals. The Nationals, despite only 10% odds, won the number 1 pick for the 3rd time in their history. 2009, Steven Strasburg, 2020, Bryce Harper, and 2025. They've got a pretty damn good track record. All right. They hit number 1 at 2 points of the draft where there was a slam dunk. This is the guy. And by the way, he ended up being the guy in both cases. And I don't know that we have that in 2025 after doing some research. I just don't know. There's certainly players that I like. There's certainly players that I'm reading that other experts love, have high ceilings on. I know you've done some dabbling into some of these names. Give us a few names and then maybe your thoughts on where things end up on Sunday at the number 1 pick.
Well, Kylie McDaniel, actually ESPN draft guy, released something this morning, which basically said the industry believes the Nationals are down to the 2 guys you basically highlighted at the top of your piece, Cade Anderson or Ethan Holiday. I personally think with the Mike Rizzo, Davey Martinez stuff, I am leaning towards what I view as the safer pick in Ethan Holiday. That's where I think things ultimately end up. CJ Abrams is pretty far down his service timeline at this point. So kind of by the time you would sort of anticipate an Ethan Holiday arrival in the majors, you could be, beyond CJ Abrams' service timeline. So I think that could, people hinting at that as like being a holdup. I don't really necessarily agree. I'm not aligned with that so much.
Not to mention Holiday somewhat projects more towards the hot corner at third base, which is a position the Nationals haven't figured out since Ryan Zimmerman. So it's there's a huge need on the left side of that infield, despite, the timeline and stuff like that. I just can't look at Ethan Holiday and think Major League Baseball yet. He looks 12, Dan. He looks 12 years old in pictures from like last month, but I understand it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jackson Holiday's in the
majors. I know. The pedigree's ridiculous.
And the name value, I mean, there's a chance that they become the first brother duo to ever be drafted first pick overall. I believe there were 14 drafted in MLB history, but never both first overall. In the first round, that is. I left that part out. So, I mean, there's name value there. There's pedigree there. I mean, they just changed front offices. Now, it's really just the name of the front office. It sounds like they're keeping most of the personnel. I read that they completely flipped some of their development staff last year. It sounds like they're going to stay on for some continuity. So I think what I'm saying is they already know. I mean, they might not know exactly who they're going to pick, but strategies have already been discussed and put in place into how they want to utilize their draft pool. I doubt the change at GM changes like the direction they're going to go hugely right now. But TBD.
I'd take the pitcher. I would take the pitcher. I think they have some notable position players in the system and already at the Major League Baseball level. And I just think we're getting to a point, Dan, where you're not just holding one ace at the top of the rotation and filling in the blanks from there. I mean, those days are long gone. I think the days of having 2 pitchers and filling in the blanks are gone. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you don't have 4 starting pitchers worth a damn in the current window that you're trying to compete in and contend in, you're probably not getting anywhere. And I realized that, the Dodgers just won the World Series with basically their C rotation available because of injuries. But that's a complete unicorn anomaly because they threw $600 million at their position players to counteract what they didn't have on the mound at times. So I don't know. I'm just looking at some of these pitchers. And by the way, just in my internal reading, it sounds like the second name that I have on the list here, Seth Hernandez, might be the most talented pitcher in this draft with the highest ceiling. He may not be MLB ready like Cade Anderson appears to be coming off that LSU run in the College World Series, but I don't know. I could see the Nationals going anywhere. And now you're with the ousting of the GM and the head coach and the manager just a week before, which, by the way, you and I both confirmed has nothing to do with the draft. It had everything to do with the fact that they had club options in their contracts that would have vested 2026. So rather than be able to wait to the end of the season, they had to do it this week to get away from those exercised options. But it did have something to do with the draft. There were certainly other stakeholders that in place here that you mentioned. Holiday's probably the safer pick, but I got to tell you, as a big follower of this National League East, there's a heck of a lot to like on this Washington Nationals team right now, and I don't know that they're in rebuild mode or timeline. Let's look at what we can have over the next 4 to 5 years. This is probably a team where a GM with a little bit more aggressive nature and maybe somebody who can tweak the ownership a little bit, which is a mess, can look around and say, if we start putting our foot down just a little bit, there's a world where we're a wild card team in 2027 or so. So I think a pitcher is a better fit for that model, but we'll see. So I like that there's no clear cut number one. That makes next weekend a little bit more fun.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess I'm coming from a standpoint of big bonus pool. You can kind of spread that out with pitchers further down the line, grab the top tier talent, if you will, with the first overall pick. But I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. They are nowhere in terms of pitching development so far. And that takes years to kind of flip on its head. So if they were to start now with using that pick on somebody who seems safe, like a pretty safe overall, with some ceiling though. I mean, it sounds like he has 3 to 4 major league ready pitches already. This is Cade Anderson. I'm referencing. So
if you can't develop them, just take the guy who's ready.
Right. Makes sense. It makes sense. So we'll see the direction they go here.
Real quick before we get out of here, every single pick over the past every single number one overall pick over the past 4 years has gone under slot for one reason or another. In 2020, we had a slight over slot number one overall pick. We know who that was. That was a big one. What's going to happen this year based on the prospects that we just kind of laid out, the situation that the Nationals are in? Do you expect it to be an $11 million bonus pick, Dan, or do you think it'll be an under slot value to spread things out more?
I don't have an actual number to put out there for you, but it's pretty confidently going to be under slot, which is entirely the value of really winning that bonus pool. Is you immediately, they're immediately the biggest bonus. The Nationals are the biggest bonus pool in the league. Excuse me. They have a massive leg up there, so they can go a bit under slot if they want. With that pick and spread it out further down the board, but it's pretty safely going to definitely be an under slot pick in my opinion.
All right, fair enough. So that means probably no picks at the $11 million mark, but I think we'll have at least one in the 10 million range, which will be up there in terms of the top 5 all time. So that's at least a good step forward for these rookies as we kind of lead ourselves into some of these quick questions. Trading draft picks. The only picks that can be traded, a few have been, are the competitive balance A and B rounds. Is that enough for you? Because there's like 4 different layers now. These comp picks, the PPI pick, the traditional picks. Are you good with where we are with that, or do you think that's something that comes up in this next CBA iteration?
No, I mean, I think we're both on the same page with we'd love to see more pick trading in Major League Baseball, and kind of why we were poking around with this topic last night. I did see an article that apparently Rob Manfred is open to that idea. So whether that's serious, whether that's a negotiation tactic on their part, I do not want to label, because we know everything at this point is public jockeying. But I believe that article was from last year. So I hope that's that would make things a lot more interesting. But I'm sure, like any other MLB topic, it would come with a dozen different other caveats that would cause more confusion amongst the basic fans out there. So
how many years in a row would the Dodgers trade their first round pick if they were able to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Well, it's incredible too. Like it would be interesting to see how teams that are consistently at the bottom of the draft with a smaller bonus pool, like the Dodgers, would value those picks in that sort of atmosphere.
I think the LA Rams went on an 8-year run. I might be wrong on that, but it was a significant run where they said, we are good. We don't need to spend or develop at that level right now. We would rather just bring in big league ball players to join our crew and make sure we can afford to keep this band together. And they just punted on first round picks consistently while they were in their window of contention. It didn't really get them multiple Super Bowls, but you can understand the logic. And I do think that is exactly what Major League Baseball is worried about, is the Goliaths just saying, F the draft. we're gonna, but is that really the worst thing in the world? Because it probably means that bad teams are, yes, handing away a star player to the Dodgers, but being allowed to garner multiple first round picks, which is the only real way those teams have, those smaller markets have, draft, develop, and afford to be able to create some sort of, small market good team like we've seen in the past. So I think the benefits outweigh, don't you?
Oh, just from a public.
Yes. Talking points.
Yeah. I think
the hot stove is so singular in this sport. If we could include trading the number 1 overall pick, you're raising your level of interest publicly to another 20% at least? Because the lottery happens in December. The draft happens in July. Are you telling me we could have 7 months of speculation during the Paul Skeens draft of which team could actually put in the Godfather offer for that number 1 overall pick? Baseball missed out on 7 months of that hot stove because of this rule. So I do understand it's got its negatives, but I do think it's time for Manfred, who has been pretty damn aggressive. I'm going to give him credit to at least broach the conversation with the next CBA, which is going to be ugly anyway. You might as well throw the kitchen sink at the damn thing.
Well, to that point, whether it's trading draft picks or something like that, or a free agency window, a narrow free agency window, I do think the next CBA will have something that is geared towards public, making things more exciting, turning this into more of a
TV show. You got to make phases for TV shows.
Exactly, because they've done a poor job, and I think they know that, and I don't think they can wait another 5 years to make major changes to that system, or they're going to kind of get lost in the shuffle here. I mean, I don't follow the NBA. I can admit that on this podcast, but watching the NBA free agency stuff play out is super exciting. And if we could squeeze things into some sort of similar system like that, I mean, I know it's not, there's a million reasons it might not happen, but they need to take steps to create more excitement in the slower times for baseball here. And I think free agency would be a good start, but trading draft picks would also be a nice tidbit there.
All right. We've hit our hour limit as usual. That's it's about as much as I can give you. There's plenty more in this comprehensive draft primer and plenty more to come as Dan and I think of ways to make this an even better sort of educational tool that we'll keep on the site and keep adding to kind of year by year. But that's the nuts and bolts of the upcoming draft. As I noted, I put out an all-star roster piece as well. We'll have trade deadline news coming. I put a fun piece out last week, which is just kind of a look at, I think, 12 or 13 players with some significantly objective destinations, predictive destinations for where these players might land. But trade deadline's 24 days away. It could be pretty juicy because let's be frank, the teams at the top of these divisions are the big spending teams. It's just sort of the way that the league is going this year. There's some anomalies, but that AL East is nasty. The NL East is nasty. The NL West looks great heading into July here. So it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun movement, and we'll see what that means in terms of trades. So plenty more work to do. I appreciate it, Dan.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.